teachers, pianists, colleagues, and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach the Rondo alla turca by Mozart. This is, of course, the third movement of his sonata in A major, K331. I know you all know this, but it sounds like this. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. This is a student favorite. I think that's because it's just very fun sounding. It's by a classic composer, Mozart, and it's very catchy. It's very patterned and repetitive, and so it just kind of sticks in your ear like an earworm. So there's lots of reasons why students might want to play this piece. However, it's oftentimes requested by students who are not ready yet to play this piece because it's just too hard for them technically to actually get through. So for that reason, this is included on my Not Ready Yet resource, which is almost published. Ironically, it's not ready yet at the time of this video, and it's called Not Ready Yet. And that resource is going to be the top 10 pieces that students request to play that they're often not ready to handle yet, and all of my ideas for you on what you can do instead or how you can help a student achieve a goal of working towards that piece or playing an arrangement or something like that. So if you'd like to get your name on the list to know when that is published, please click the link in the description of this video. Usually when a student brings a piece like this or Clair de Lune or something by Chopin, when they bring something like that in and they want to play it, there are three issues about the difficulty. The first one is that it's just complex. It's beyond their reading or decoding ability, or there's lots of, reading and musical things that they haven't encountered yet. That's actually not a problem in this Mozart because, as I said, it's very catchy and repetitive. It's not very hard to actually learn the notes. And the last time I taught this, it was to a teenager who, by her own admission, is not a great reader. She has a great ear and she can play, but reading is not her favorite thing. And she had very little trouble actually learning this. She even came back after the first week in my memory of her lessons on this and said, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So again, that's not the issue on this piece. The second thing is technical demands, and this is the big one. A student who tries to tackle a piece with a lot of octaves or difficult technical elements that they just haven't been prepared for, and so they can't physically navigate those things. That is the issue on the Rondo alla turca. So I'm going to spend most of this video giving you some tips on teaching technique in this piece. The third issue is length. Many of these great masterworks that students want to play are just quite long. And so even if a student can handle some of the technical demands and do all the reading and decoding, they might not have built up the stamina to be able to play the entire movement all the way through. Particularly with this piece, one of the issues is keeping the same tempo all the way through because it's just technically demanding for, 3.5 minutes or something if you play the whole thing, certainly with repeats. So for that reason, I do think it's perfectly acceptable in the scope of someone learning to play the piano to just play an excerpt of this, and you can easily have a student learn measures 1 through 24, that opening A section. That section does not have the same technical demands that we have going on from there once we start playing the broken and blocked octaves. So just keep that in mind. If you have a young student, say an early intermediate student, come in and say they really want to play this, you could offer them an arrangement, but you could also just offer for them to play the first section. That's what I do on Fur-Elise as well. Same situation where the length is one of the big problems, and the A section is very catchy and not so difficult to learn. When Mozart wrote this, I think he intended to imitate Turkish Janissary bands or military marching bands. I'm going to put an image up here from Wikipedia of what a Janissary band might look like. And if you look at the instruments that are there, you can see, a bass drum, cymbals. You can think as you listen to this piece played on the piano that it is trying to imitate the sound of an ensemble like that. That's one of the reasons that makes this fun, and that was very fashionable at the time when Mozart wrote this. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you work on with the students, that they can imaginatively enter in that way and also think about how these sounds are imitating that. The ornaments are part of this, and we're going to talk about those at the end of this video, so do be sure to stick around for that. All right, let's talk about technique. This piece uses the tonal centers of A minor, A major, F sharp minor. Those are the primary keys that we use because F sharp minor is the relative to A major. And so any student working on this should know chords and scales, certainly in those three keys. I think students particularly need to have built in their F sharp minor scale fingering, which is not the easiest scale. It's one that my students struggle to master fluently, but they need to understand that E sharp is part of the harmonic minor scale. And you know, these patterns starting at 33 are scale-like. They're not really scales. There are some A major scales. If you look at measure 41, that's just a straight up ascending A major scale. So certainly knowing your scale patterns is helpful, but even just having practice in F sharp minor scales and chords will definitely help the learning process in this as well. To that end, fingering is very important. And I am looking at this today in Jane McGraw's Encore, which I love the fingering in this edition. Remember, fingering is personal and editorial 99% of the time, and so you should feel free to change it as needed for the shape of a student's hand and what feels comfortable. But I really like Jane McGraw's fingering as a starting point, not only for comfort, but also for how it sounds when you use that fingering, that it appropriately accents, puts strong fingers on strong beats. So I do highly suggest this edition, and I have a free resource related to the Encore books of free listening lists. So again, that link will be in the description of this video. One of the big issues in this piece is octaves. We have blocked octaves in the right hand. A lot of broken octaves, both in the left hand and right hand. Even in the A section, these are not very hard, but measure 9. And then the right hand, the broken octaves show up in that same theme I just played, the A major theme. That is technically quite difficult. So let's talk about octaves for a minute. I have addressed octaves in other videos. You can click right up there to see some of those. The way that I like to first train my students on octave technique is by doing an octave scale, and I would probably do that in C major first. But since this is so definitely A major for this right hand part, I would have a student practice an A major octave scale, blocked first, with a return to natural hand shape in between each octave. Contract, open, contract, open, contract. And we're training students to not hold excess tension or to lock into a fixed position by doing this. Once they can do that comfortably very slowly, then you can just gradually increase the tempo, which means they have to just, quickly come in and out. And they might not get all the way back to a fully closed hand, but it's enough to release any tension that's built up. And the analogy that I primarily use with this is a large rubber band. When you stretch it out, it's stretched, and then as soon as you let go, it just goes back to that natural shape. And the same is true with our hands. When we extend those muscles and our hand shape out, then when we just let go, it goes right back to that natural hand shape. That's what I would do first, and then I would have a student practice measure 25 slowly with those contractions, particularly when you get to the quarter notes. You've got an opportunity to rest back into natural hand shape. Now you have an option of using 4 on some of the black keys. When I'm playing an octave scale, I do use my 4. Jane McGraw has actually notated finger 5 on top for all of these. So that's something to think about if your student is experienced with 4. Do you want them to do 4, 4? Or do you want to stick with 5? I think that's something to try and see what feels best and what sounds best. Now over in measure 89, it's the exact same pattern. So if your student has practiced it blocked first, they don't really have to think about what the notes are, but they have to break it up. So you can also practice the octave scale broken in this manner, etc., coming up and down. One way to make this feel a little more comfortable would be to think of these broken octaves as a rolled octave instead of rhythmically evenly broken. So play it blocked first and then just roll them. Now you would not want to perform it that way because that's not rhythmically correct. But if you think of it that way and then you just kind of relax it so it gets closer to the rhythm, it starts to sound like even 16th notes. It also puts the emphasis on the thumb, which is what I think should happen because that's on the beat. So beat. I don't think those should all be even. I think that's very, very cumbersome and not what is appropriate to the style. I also just want to comment that measure 95 at the end of that section, right before the first and second endings, is the most difficult because of the intervals. So you have F sharp, up to B, down a third, down a third. So that requires extra practice, and I would strongly recommend a small lift after the E and fall into the blocked octave at measure 96. So take a look at that with your students. Similar to that rolling idea is these left-hand rolled chords when we have that theme. I would have a student block that first to feel that 4-note chord in A major, and then of course D. The outside octave just goes up to D sharp, the inside notes stay the same, and then to E. And then they're just thinking of that as one unit up to the downbeat, then with lighter repeated notes after that. So one unit, and then light. One unit. If students think of that as more individual notes, it will be very cumbersome to play and it won't sound right either. This is imitating maybe that bass drum in the Janissary band or some other, set of instruments. It's giving that roll and that emphasis and, the strong beats to undergird that harmony. So hopefully those things give you some ideas on ways to technically address this piece. It is very important that you send a student home, even in the first lesson, with some ideas on how to approach these things, unless they have already had a lot of experience with octaves and 4-note chords. They will need some attention on that to go home and practice without building up a lot of tension and bad habits in this. One of the other main issues with this piece, and this relates to the, musical reading and decoding and understanding stylistically what's going on, is the amount of ornaments that look like grace notes. So if you look at an Urtext edition of this or J. McGraw's edition, the opening motive is printed as an appoggiatura, a small note on the B, 8th note A, and then 2 16th notes G sharp A. That's how Mozart wrote this out. An appoggiatura is an ornament that is a non-chord tone. B does not belong in an A minor chord. So it is a non-chord tone on the beat that then resolves. In this case, it should be played as a 16th note, so 4 even 16th notes. And in some older, less scholarly editions, you see it printed this way. But if you pull up an Urtext and you didn't know any better, you might play, and I've actually heard students do that before, but that is not how these are supposed to be executed. The other kind of ornament that we have is like those left-hand rolled chords in 25, and like the right hand in measure 5, we have acciaccaturas, which I don't frequently use that word. They're the standard grace note that come very, very quickly before the beat, before the note. And so just again, one of the reasons I do recommend J. McGraw's edition or any other good scholarly yet student helpful edition is that if you look at the bottom of page 16 where this is printed in the Encore book, she has explained that you should play the appoggiaturas as 4/16, that the acciaccattura grace notes should come quickly before the beat, and she's got a printed out trill for you at the end of the A section. So this is what you pay for when you buy good student editions, is that help and that realization of those ornaments. So there's no confusion for you or as a teacher or for a student who is encountering these kinds of things for the first time. Don't forget to check out the Not Ready Yet resource, which is coming very, very soon, and all the other links that are in the description of this video. I wish you all the best in your teaching and playing.